Before you can hope to understand what's going on in another person's mind, you first have to quiet the storm in your own. This isn't self-help fluff. It's the blunt truth. Your triggers, your fears, your need to be right or liked, these shape not only how you feel, but how you see. If your inner world is unsettled, you don't see others clearly. You only see them through the fog of your own emotions. That's not perception, that's projection. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it words. They trained not in tricks, but in silence. Stillness was their discipline, not the stillness of escape, but the stillness of presence, where the ego steps aside and attention sharpens like a blade. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Stillness is the start of that awakening." When your mind is steady like a calm lake, it reflects others without distortion. You begin to sense not just what people say, but what they mean. Not just how they act, but what they carry beneath the act. Yet the world teaches the opposite. It tells us to talk louder, react quicker, win the room. But all that noise drowns the subtle truths, those flickers in the eyes, the pauses in speech, the weight in silence. If you've ever felt that people are wearing masks you can't quite see through, this is the reason. You're not missing the signs. You're just not quiet enough to notice. Stillness doesn't mean freezing or zoning out. It means clearing the static of your own ego. No rushing to judge, no rehearsing replies, no twisting their words into your story, just presence. That pause creates space between their truth and your reaction. And in that space, something powerful happens. You stop treating people as characters in your script and start seeing them as unfolding lives of their own. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." The same applies to conversations. If you rush through them, chasing only the surface of words, you miss the human reality underneath. True stillness lets you notice the rhythm of someone's breathing, the break in their voice, the hesitation before they share something raw. These are not accidents. They are the openings where truth slips through. Most people miss these details not because they're hidden, but because they're too loud inside to notice. Culture praises speed, clever comebacks, instant analysis. But wisdom doesn't rush. Wisdom waits. I've learned this in my own life. Times when I was eager to prove myself, I missed what people were really saying. Only later did I realize the signals had been there all along. The nervous hands, the shift in tone, the forced smile. My impatience blinded me. When I practiced silence, when I stopped needing to impress, I began to notice what had always been present. Stillness, then, is not emptiness, it's clarity. It's not passivity, it's presence. And presence is rare in a world addicted to distraction. But when you bring it, people feel it. They sense the difference of someone who isn't rushing to reply, who isn't trying to win, who simply attends. That's where understanding begins. Not in clever tactics, but in calm attention. Reading others starts when you stop rehearsing your own script. And that practice begins with you. So the first skill, the foundation of all the rest, is this: learn to be still. Not the kind of stillness that avoids life, but the kind that engages it with eyes open and ego set aside. In that quiet space, truth appears, not forced, not demanded, but revealed. Part 2, observation and signals. Once you've built stillness, the next step is learning to observe, not with suspicion, but with clarity. Observation is not about decoding people like puzzles. It's about noticing what most overlook, the signals that live between words. Most of us are taught to listen only to language, but words are often masks. People say what they think they're supposed to say, what will protect them, what will keep the peace. The body, however, rarely lies. It leaks truth in small gestures. The hesitation before answering a hard question, the quick glance toward the floor, the shift in posture when a painful memory is brushed against. Plato said, all learning has an emotional base. Emotion cannot be hidden forever. It surfaces in tone, in silence, in nervous habits. If your mind is quiet, these signals are not hard to see. If your mind is loud, you'll miss everyone. The trick is not to overanalyze every twitch. It's to notice patterns over time. One nervous laugh means little, but if someone laughs every time the topic turns vulnerable, that's not random. It's a rhythm. A rhythm tells you where their fears live. Aristotle reminded us, we are what we repeatedly do. The same applies here. People reveal themselves most in repetition. When discomfort comes, how do they react? Withdraw, deflect, or confront? These rhythms are communication. They tell you far more than polished sentences ever could. I've seen this in my own mistakes. I once trusted someone's calm words, ignoring the tension in their jaw and the way their eyes darted when emotions came up. Later, when conflict hit, their withdrawal was no surprise. It had been there all along. I simply hadn't paid attention. That failure stung, but it taught me this. The body always tells the story. You only need to watch long enough to hear it. Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide or deny. You'll often see someone's shadow not in what they say, but in what they avoid. The subjects they skim past, the laughter that feels too quick, the sudden subject change when emotions draw close. These are clues not to judge, but to understand. And this is where patience matters. Reading people isn't about cracking them open in one conversation. It's about allowing patterns to reveal themselves naturally. 3, 4, 5 repeated signals form a rhythm. And once you see the rhythm, you understand more of the person standing before you. But here's the key. Your observation is only as good as your honesty with yourself. If you haven't studied your own tells, the way your voice drops when you're insecure, the way your jaw tightens when you're angry, you'll misinterpret theirs. What you haven't faced in yourself, you'll project onto others. So start with self-awareness. Know your own signals. That recognition makes seeing others clearer. And when you do notice their patterns, compassion must come first. Recognizing a mask doesn't mean tearing it away. It means respecting why it's there. We've all worn them. Understanding that simple fact changes the way you read others, not as puzzles to solve, but as humans to connect with. The untrained eye looks only for words. The trained one notices the silence, the posture, the breath. This isn't manipulation, it's connection. Because behind every pause, every nervous habit, every subtle shift, there's a story waiting to be seen. So watch carefully. Not to control, not to judge, but to understand. Let silence speak. Let repetition reveal. And remember, what people do consistently tells you who they are far more honestly than what they claim once. That's the essence of observation. It's not about being clever. It's about being present enough to notice what most ignore. Part 3, self-awareness first. Before you can read others, you must first learn to read yourself. This is the most overlooked step, yet it's the one that makes all the difference. If you've never stopped to notice what your own body does when you're anxious, or how your tone shifts when you're hiding something, then every attempt to understand others will be clouded. Socrates said, "Know thyself." It wasn't just advice for self-reflection. It was a requirement for wisdom. When you know your own patterns, you stop mistaking them for other people's. You stop confusing someone's silence with rejection or someone's anger with a personal attack. You see what's actually there, not what your past has trained you to expect. Our bodies hold truths we rarely acknowledge. The jaw that tightens when we're suppressing anger. The restless hands that fidget when we feel exposed. The forced smile we put on to avoid uncomfortable questions. These are signals, and if you can't read them in yourself, you'll miss them in others. Carl Jung once wrote, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That includes your unconscious movements, your habits of avoidance, your emotional defenses. They run on autopilot until you name them. And once you do, you begin to reclaim control. I've had to face this myself. There were times when I thought I was calm in conversation, but in reality, my body was betraying me. Tapping fingers, tight shoulders, clipped words. I was blind to these signals. Only when I began journaling and reflecting daily did I see the truth. I wasn't calm, I was suppressing. That realization stung, but it freed me. It allowed me to see the same signals in others with clearer eyes. This is why self-awareness and compassion go hand in hand. When you recognize the mask you've worn, you stop tearing at the masks of others. You know why they're there. You've built them too. And that shared recognition creates presence, not pressure. It makes people feel seen without being forced to reveal what they're not ready to share. Reading yourself is not about criticism, it's about clarity. You don't study your habits to shame yourself. You study them to understand. When you know your own rhythms of avoidance, you're less likely to project them outward. You catch yourself before you interrupt, before you judge too quickly, before you drag the conversation back to your own story. That awareness alone changes the way you show up. And here's the paradox. The clearer you are with yourself, the quieter you become with others. You don't feel the need to fill every silence or prove every point. You don't listen just to respond. You simply listen. And in that quiet space, people reveal themselves. This is why Stoicism insists on daily reflection. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not to impress anyone, but to keep track of his own mind. He knew that if he didn't examine himself daily, his ego would creep back in and distort his vision. Self-examination was his anchor, his training ground. So before you focus outward, turn inward. Notice your breath when you're uneasy. Notice your posture when you feel small. Notice the excuses you tell yourself when you avoid discomfort. The more honest you are about your own tells, the more fluent you become in the language of others. Reading people begins with reading yourself. It always starts there, because if your inner world is unclear, your outer perception will be distorted. But if your inner world is steady, your attention becomes a mirror, calm, clear, and sharp. Part 4. Holding center and curiosity. Once you've built self-awareness, the challenge becomes holding your center in the presence of others. This is where most people falter. They can stay calm in silence, but the moment someone else's anger flares or sadness deepens, they lose their footing. They stop observing and start reacting. When you react, you lose the signal. Their emotions stir up your own, and suddenly the space for clarity collapses. To truly understand someone, you have to stand steady even when their energy pulls at you. That steadiness is what I call holding center. Socrates reminded us, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Holding center is an act of humility. It means not rushing to interpret every pause or label every shift. It means letting curiosity lead instead of judgment. Curiosity is a quiet force. It doesn't push, it doesn't demand, it waits, it notices contradictions. When words say one thing, but the body says another, and asks, what might this mean? Not with suspicion, but with openness. I've experienced this in countless conversations. There were times when someone's silence made me spiral, convinced they were rejecting me. Other times when someone's sharp tone made me defensive before I even thought. In those moments, I wasn't reading them. I was reacting to my own insecurities. But when I learned to hold center, to pause and let curiosity replace certainty, everything shifted. Curiosity keeps you from rushing to conclusions. You don't need to know someone in the first 5 minutes. You don't need to finish their sentences or prove you understand. You simply give space, and in that space, truth has room to emerge. Plato taught that wisdom begins in wonder. Wonder is what curiosity feels like in practice. It's the willingness to sit with uncertainty instead of forcing clarity too soon. Most people can't do this. They rush to define others quickly because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. But Stoicism teaches us that discomfort is training. By enduring it, you sharpen your presence. Holding center also means not letting your emotions mirror theirs automatically. If someone is angry, you don't need to become angry too. If someone is anxious, you don't need to absorb their panic. You witness without being swallowed. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Their energy is outside. Your response is inside. And here's the paradox. When you stay calm in their storm, people begin to reveal more. They sense that you are not trying to control or judge them. That safety allows them to drop their guard. They show you more of who they are, not because you forced it, but because you stayed grounded. Curiosity strengthens this process. It turns every moment into an exploration rather than a verdict. Instead of labeling someone arrogant, you wonder what fear might drive their behavior. Instead of condemning their silence, you consider what weight they might be carrying. This doesn't mean excusing harm. It means refusing to let snap judgments blind you to deeper truths. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Holding center keeps you from lashing out at irritation and allows you to use it as a mirror. What bothers you in them might be unexamined in yourself. This kind of restraint is hard. It takes practice to pause instead of pounce, to breathe instead of bark, to listen instead of defend. But each pause strengthens you. Each moment you resist reaction builds a discipline that no trick can replace. In time, you'll notice something else. People trust you more. Not because you say the right words, but because you don't need to. Your presence speaks louder. And in a world of noise, a calm presence is magnetic. So practice holding center. Pair it with curiosity. Let go of the need to be right, to be quick, to be clever. Replace it with the discipline to be steady and the courage to stay curious. That combination doesn't just make you better at reading others. It makes you harder to shake, harder to offend, harder to control. That's the quiet strength of a Stoic mind. Calm, grounded, and open. Part 5. Boundaries and Daily Rituals. If stillness, observation, and self-awareness are the foundation, then boundaries are the walls that protect it. Without boundaries, all your inner work leaks out into the noise of the world. You become reactive, drained, scattered. Boundaries are not about shutting life out. They're about keeping your center intact. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to waste time debating what a good man should be, but simply to be one. In practice, that meant refusing to pour his energy into petty arguments, pointless distractions, or the endless need for approval. He guarded his mind the way others guard their treasures. In our world, boundaries look like this: refusing to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, saying no when every part of you knows you don't have the capacity, choosing silence instead of chasing validation. These aren't acts of weakness, they're acts of precision. Most of what drains us isn't what we do, it's what we carry. The pressure to perform stress when stress isn't needed, the need to be seen, to be approved, to be explained. But the more you carry, the less space you leave for clarity. Stoicism teaches subtraction, freedom not from doing more, but from needing less. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You cannot do that if you spend every day bending yourself to meet expectations that don't align with your nature. Boundaries are how you create the silence required to hear your own voice. I've learned this painfully. There were seasons when I said yes to everything, to prove myself, to please others, to avoid conflict. but each yes hollowed me out. My attention scattered, my purpose blurred. Only when I began setting boundaries, simple, firm ones, did I regain strength. It wasn't about building walls against people. It was about refusing to betray myself. Boundaries aren't just external, they are internal. They mean telling yourself, I will not scroll endlessly tonight. I will not let anger write my words. I will not hand over my peace for the cheap thrill of being right. These choices don't make life smaller. They make it sharper. And here's the anchor: rituals. A single chosen act that roots your boundaries in reality. Not a dramatic overhaul, but one daily behavior that reminds you who you are becoming. It could be a silent walk at dawn when the world hasn't yet demanded anything of you. It could be journaling at night, facing yourself honestly without excuse. It could be the cold shock of water in the morning, a reminder that you choose discomfort to stay sharp. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Ritual is how you transform wisdom into habit. When practiced consistently, it becomes your fingerprint, your signature on the day. You stop needing to remind yourself, you simply do it. And slowly that act becomes part of your identity. Motivation comes and goes like weather. Ritual remains. The Stoics didn't wait to feel like being calm, generous, or disciplined. They lived by vows. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily to remind himself who he was trying to be. Not to impress, but to practice. That's the difference between hype and identity. Your ritual doesn't have to impress anyone. It doesn't have to be visible. In fact, the quieter it is, the more powerful it becomes. Because you're not performing it for others. You're embodying it for yourself. And when you embody it enough times, resistance fades, excuses weaken, and what's left is discipline. So ask yourself, what's one act I can commit to daily without negotiation that pulls me closer to the person I claim I want to be? Choose it, practice it, protect it. That ritual becomes your anchor in the storm. Boundaries guard your energy. Rituals direct it. Together, they create a structure strong enough to withstand the noise of life. And within that structure, transformation becomes not a hope, but a daily practice. Part 6. Patterns in truth and repetition. When it comes to truly understanding people, single moments can mislead you. Anyone can seem calm when life is easy, kind when things are going their way, honest when the stakes are low. The real truth shows up in patterns, in what people repeat under pressure, in how they respond when discomfort doesn't let up. Socrates once warned, "The unexamined life is not worth living." The same can be said for relationships. If you don't examine the patterns in yourself and others, you'll mistake accidents for character and rehearsed moments for truth. Here's what patterns reveal. When someone avoids every vulnerable question by joking, that's not random, that's habit. When anger always turns to silence, or silence always turns to withdrawal, those are rhythms. And rhythms speak louder than isolated words. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Most people live in unconscious repetition. They avoid, deflect, lie, or lash out without even realizing it. These habits shape their lives like a script, and unless they examine them, they'll call it destiny. I've seen this both in myself and others. I once thought I was patient, but the truth was, in the pattern, I snapped whenever stress piled up, no matter how much I told myself I was calm. My words painted one picture, my habits painted another. It was only by admitting that pattern that I could begin to change. This is why Stoics place so much weight on daily practice. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations to be read by the world. He wrote them to track his own patterns, his slips into anger, his temptation to seek approval, his tendency to waste time. He knew that if he didn't examine these rhythms, they would quietly rule his life. The same applies when reading others. Don't rush to define someone after one interaction. Wait, watch. Let repetition speak. One contradiction can be a mistake. 10 contradictions are a truth. Not because they want to deceive, but because human beings reveal themselves most clearly in what they repeat. This is where patience becomes your advantage. Most people want fast answers. They want to know immediately who they can trust, who they should avoid. But wisdom doesn't rush. It notices over time. It pays attention to consistency, and in consistency, it finds character. Patterns also reveal where someone hasn't yet grown. If they always deflect sadness with laughter, you know they fear vulnerability. If they always lash out when criticized, you know they struggle with shame. These aren't reasons to condemn. They're reasons to understand. They show you where their battles are, even if they can't name them themselves. The same is true for you. Look at your own repeated responses. Do you avoid hard conversations until it's too late? Do you chase approval even when you know it leaves you empty? These aren't random slips, they're patterns. And patterns can only be broken once they're seen. The Stoics believed life wasn't about perfect control, but about honest awareness. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Each repeated reaction is friction. It's not there to shame you, it's there to sharpen you. Here's the danger. If you ignore patterns, you'll confuse luck for character. You'll believe someone's single act of kindness means they're kind, or their one confession of honesty means they're trustworthy. But character is not a single act. It is the rhythm behind the acts. And once you see the rhythm, you stop being fooled by appearances. So train yourself to notice. Don't just listen to words. Watch what repeats. Pay attention not just to what people say when they're calm, but what they do when they're under pressure. That's where the truth hides. And when you see patterns clearly, you also learn compassion, because you recognize that we all live in rhythms, some strong, some broken. And just as others' patterns expose their struggles, yours do too. This awareness frees you from harsh judgment. It turns perception into connection. The lesson is simple. One act can be faked. A pattern cannot. By now you've seen the path. Stillness, observation, self-awareness, boundaries, rituals, patterns. All of these weave together into something more than techniques. They become a way of living. And the truth is, the art of reading people was never really about them. It was always about you. Because when your inner world is noisy, your perception is distorted. But when your inner world is calm, sharp, and disciplined, the fog clears. You don't just see others more clearly, you see yourself more clearly. And that changes everything. The world trains us to be fast, loud, reactive. But wisdom whispers, slow down, pay attention, stop rushing to define, to argue, to prove. In that quiet, subtle truths rise. You notice the hesitation in a voice, the weight in a pause, the contradiction between words and posture. And more importantly, you notice your own impulse to react, to control, to judge. Each time you resist that impulse, you grow stronger. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. He wasn't being morbid. He was practicing clarity. He was cutting through noise to return to what matters. Presence, honesty, and discipline. If death could come at any moment, then every moment matters. In practice, this means holding yourself to a higher standard. Not because anyone's watching, but because you are. The mirror test, the ability to look at your own day without excuses, becomes your measure. Did you stay present? Did you honor your word? Did you choose clarity over comfort? If yes, then you've grown. If no, then you've been shown where to improve. That's not failure, that's feedback. Here's the paradox. The more disciplined you become, the freer you feel. Boundaries don't cage you. They release you from distractions. Rituals don't restrict you. They anchor you in strength. Stillness doesn't make you passive. It sharpens your presence. And patterns don't trap you. They reveal the path to growth. But none of this works without responsibility. Ownership is the cost of freedom. Every time you hand away responsibility to excuses, to others, to circumstance, you shrink. Every time you take it back, you rise. The Stoics knew this deeply. Epictetus said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond." That is the essence of freedom. So where does this leave you? It leaves you with a choice. You can continue drifting, reacting, blaming, hoping others will change. Or you can take the harder path, the Stoic path, where growth is daily, discipline is steady, and freedom comes not from avoiding weight, but from carrying it with strength. I've learned this the hard way. There were seasons where I gave in to excuses, waiting for motivation to appear. It never came. Change didn't arrive until I stopped waiting and started acting. One choice at a time, one ritual at a time. And slowly I realized, growth isn't something gifted, it's something built. And now I'll leave you with this punchline. True strength doesn't come from waiting for the world to quiet down. It comes from becoming the kind of person who stays steady in the noise. Greatness isn't born, it's forged, one disciplined act at a time. If this message resonates with you, don't just nod and move on. Take it into your life. Choose one practice, one boundary, one ritual. Anchor yourself in it daily. Let it be the quiet rebellion that reshapes who you are. And if you found value here, subscribe, not just to this channel, but to your own discipline, your own clarity, your own growth. Because in the end, the real journey isn't about watching another video. It's about living the philosophy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing the harder path. Until next time, stay grounded, stay steady, and never stop walking the quiet strength within you.